to the people on Zoom real quick. So welcome everybody to our town hall meeting on the window replacement project. People in the audience, I'd like you to make sure your cell phones are on silent mode, please. And the people on Zoom, you hopefully you can hear me. Can they hear me, Jim?
Yeah.
You guys are all muted, but you have an opportunity to ask questions through the chat line on your phone. Ask them when you think the question. Write your chat things on. We are documenting those chats, and at the right time, during the Q&A session, you'll have an opportunity to answer those questions. So you're going to be muted though, and it's going to the screen like this now. And I'm going to turn it over to Frank, who's going to introduce our consultants and give a little background on the project. Thanks.
Morning. Thanks, guys, for showing up. I'm going to look at some notes. I have a couple of points I want to make sure I make here. I'm a longtime resident here at Bay Scene, member of the current board of directors of the Homeowners Association. In addition to this Zoom, we're also recording this meeting. I think Bob might have mentioned this for later viewing by anyone who's so interested. I want to thank Jim Gottlieb, our neighbor Jim Gottlieb, for setting this Zoom apparatus up. It was something that was well beyond us. And he pulled out some technical wizardry for this, and that's good. And also some thanks to another homeowner here, John Sparer, who lives part-time here and part-time in Las Vegas. He's a pretty well-known architect, and he served on our Windows committee and had some really valuable input when we're dealing with the windows and with our consultants here. Now, you probably are aware that last June, the Homeowners Association retained the firm of Whitmore Architects to test, evaluate our existing Windows systems and develop conceptual designs and cost estimates for repairing and replacing the windows. Their study focused on the outside fixed windows, not on the sliding glass doors. The sliding glass doors belong to each condominium. The windows on the outside are common area property. They don't belong to you if they're outside your condominium. They're part of the common area, and as such, the Homeowners Association is responsible to take care of them. That's what their study was on. The Whitmore team, a couple of weeks ago, completed the initial phase of their study, and they're here today to describe what they did, their findings, and their window design concepts. And with that, let me introduce Doug Whitmore, who's the principal architect on the Windows project. Thanks.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm Doug Whitmore. I'm an architect here in San Diego. We have sort of a distant connection to Bay Scene. I once worked for Dan Salerno and Stan Livingston, and Dan was responsible for the original design of the buildings. And also along that line, Kirsten Gambala, who's our senior project manager, he's over here. He also worked at the same place as I did. And so that's actually how we kind of got to know each other and have been working together a couple of years since that time. Our firm specializes in evaluating building failures and coming up with repairs for those. And we do designs and drawings and specs for repairs and sort of shepherd those kind of projects all the way through construction, depending, and each and every project is completely different. There's always just a new set of criteria and a new set of circumstances that bring you to a project, and Bay Scene is no different in that regard. Frank's right. We started in June. We were retained around that time. We have come out and done inspections of some of the dwelling units, the glazing system, the window system on those units. We've also done some selected testing where we've taken portions of the window system apart to be able to see how it was installed and to understand better what's in front of us for repairs. That happened in June and July and August. And then since that time, we have been formulating repair concepts, talking to manufacturers, sketching up solutions, talking to other consultants on our team. And so Frank's right. Today, it's sort of a culmination. We want to present to you the things that we're coming up with in that regard. The team consists of myself and Kirsten, we've already introduced. Also, Jeff Masnick's an architect, and he has been shepherding the design process through to this point in time. Jeff Battles, we have two Jeffs here today. Jeff Battles is one of our architectural technicians. He's handling our video stuff today. But in addition to the team from Whitmore, we have a structural engineer, Jeremy Callister from Degenkolb. They're a very reputable firm downtown San Diego and across the west coast of the United States. And then we also have a window consultant, Jim Kenway. We've worked with Jim for probably 20 years on various situations like this. So Jim's valuable to advise and look over our shoulder and basically give us ideas where we run into roadblocks and things. So he's been very helpful in this process. And then finally, we have a local general contractor that works in consulting. They provide us with cost estimates on other jobs. And they also, when we did the testing, they were the firm that did the testing and put it back together. And every so often on some of our projects, they end up doing the repair work, but that's not a commitment on anybody's part. At this point, they're just providing us with cost consultation along the way. So they go out and talk to subcontractors in town who are doing this sort of work so that we feel like the pricing that we're giving you is pretty consistent and appropriate to talk about. So with that, what we want to do is to kind of step back for a minute and talk about what are the issues that brought us here, what's wrong with the windows, why do we need to do anything? And then with that, we'll talk about a little bit of what we found when we got out there and looked into things. So that person will talk about our findings because he directed that part of the investigation. Then we'll go and talk about our solutions, and Jeff will stand up and talk about what the solutions are. And then at the end, we'll just kind of summarize, well, if we're going from here, what are the next steps? We'll talk about that at the end. So with that in mind, the first part's not exciting. Hopefully I speak well enough that it's interesting to you because you're going to get to see the pictures when Kirsten gets up here. So bear with me for a second. There's really, sort of four big areas of thinking, areas of concern that we needed to deal with. One is safety of the existing system. And then the second is the fact that there are, let's call it internal failures that are happening. You can be in one unit and hear your neighbor talking, or if they're smoking, you can smell their smoke, or you can smell their fish that they're frying, or if they left their house and left the heater on and you walked in and you thought it would be cool, but their heat is coming up through the windows. We're getting transmission of sounds and temperatures and smells and things like that. So that's an area of concern that we were charged with addressing. Also, what about the window system itself? What's its condition? Is it in good shape? Is it going to stand the test of time, or is it time to think about either fixing it or replacing it? So that there are some internal defects in the system itself that we'll talk about. And then lastly, what about just trying to use the existing system that's there and kind of making it work? So there are some structural concerns with the existing constructions, and we'll talk about those. So let's loop back for a second and talk about safety. Probably the most obvious thing on safety is that you have awning windows and that they're floor level. So if you have pets, or if you have grandkids, or if you have kids, that's a concern. If you're not watching it, those little flimsy screens are not going to hold if somebody bumps into them if you still have your screen. So that's just a concern. And nowadays you would not be able to have windows like that. You'd have to have limiters on them so that they couldn't open nearly as far as they are, that you would just get a little sliver there. So is there another option there? Yes, we'll present that in a little bit here. But that was probably a big concern of ours. Then the association let us know up front, because you have done some repair work out here, that when other windows were taken apart, that those contractors found that the attachments of the window systems weren't always there. They were corroded, they weren't attached. So there is concern about, how stable the window system that's there is in fact. And Kirsten will talk a little bit more about that, but suffice it to say, our findings weren't quite that drastic. We did find some anomalies in how it was put together. We didn't see a lack of attachment. So but the way construction works, there's usually some variations across the whole project, and where we looked, it seemed pretty well attached to us. But nevertheless, those are concerns, and we have documented proof that there are areas where they aren't attached well. I think the sound, the odors of smoke, I probably covered that adequately just by what I've already said. I'm not going to say it again. Hopefully some of you have experienced some of that, so it resonates with you. It's probably unpleasant to hear somebody else's discussion at times. You wish you didn't hear that kind of stuff. But that's one of the things that I think needs to be dealt with. Then what about the existing system that's there? First off, if you go around the outside of the building, if you haven't experienced leaking in your system, it has happened here. You have leaks through the windows, and what you need to see, you can actually see the leak by going around the outside and looking at all the past caulking that's been put in to try to stop that from happening. And it hasn't wholly worked. It might impede it for a little while, and then it comes right back. Along with that is air leakage. So if you're getting water through, you're also getting air leakage. If it's warm in your unit and it's cold outside, that cold air is going to migrate into your unit. So it's inefficient for you. The aluminum components are corroding. And that's what happens. It's a marine environment. And so there's a part of that that's not unexpected. And this system is closing in on 50 years old. And so there is some corrosion of the upper members, and we'll show you some pretty good pitting of the members themselves. But worse than that, when you get down to the ground level, over the years, the ground has been brought, I don't know if by landscaping or just by runoff, but there's ground up against some portions of the window system. And there's significant corrosion to the point where there's no longer any aluminum there. There's just holes. And even because you have that really heavy textured stucco, which holds a lot of water in it too in a rainstorm, we have corrosion where the members themselves on the verticals are actually corroding. We'll show you a picture of that here briefly. Along the lines with air leakage and water leakage, you have energy leakage, so to speak. You have single pane glazing on your windows. And so you have no barrier to speak of for heat or for cooling. If you're using your air conditioning, you're going to lose for the heat gain that you're getting through your windows. And just vice versa. If it's cold outside and you're heating, you're losing heat as a result of just it being a single pane of glass. There's, besides the original awning windows at the ground level not being safe, they're also not that operable. Some people are having difficulties operating them and getting them to latch properly. Besides the pitting of the aluminum, if you just walk around the outside, you'll see some that have a really dark bronze appearance, and you'll go to some sites that are in the sun all the time, and they're very light, almost golden. The appearance has changed drastically depending on the solar exposure over the years. And then lastly, I guess our conclusion is it is a 50-year-old project, a 50-year-old system. And we think, in our opinion, that this window system used up its useful life, that it's time. It's like you had a set of tires and they got to 40,000 or 60,000 miles and there's no tread left. You don't have a lot of years left in the system that you have that's there. But some people have retrofitted. Some people have used the verticals that are there and have plugged in units there and have put new windows inside the verticals that are there. And I think the logical question is, why can't we just keep doing that? Can we just keep plugging in? we're working, if you stop and think about it, you have single glazed with very thin frames right now. When you add in new units into those, by design, you have to now put in double glazing with heavier frames. You add that to the whole, because those verticals go the whole height of the building, you add those units and you add it all up. Our structural engineer feels like that's too much weight. That system isn't going to hold it. It's not safe, and he couldn't recommend it. Not to mention the attachments of those verticals are also not positive enough to hold that kind of weight. So you have the, is the vertical strong enough? And also where it attaches to the building, is that strong enough? And our structural engineer is of the opinion that it's not going to work. If he were to calculate out, it wouldn't calculate, it wouldn't support the weight that continuing to do those kinds of modifications would yield. And along that line, I guess I would say, just sort of as anecdotal evidence of that, some folks that have put in the bigger panes are experiencing operational difficulties with their new ones, which kind of indicates to you that there's still some movement that happens after you put the new units in there. So all combined, we think the existing structure is questionable to continue use, especially if the thought is we can just retrofit this. We really don't think that if you were to go to, we really want it to look exactly that way. We still think that those verticals would have to get replaced at a minimum. So I think that's, those are the issues that we dealt with. We also met with the board up front, and they gave us some other charges in terms of things we should look at. And as we batted around ideas, some of the criteria actually wasn't on the table originally, but it kind of floated to the top based on some of the solutions that we came up with. What's that all mean? Well, originally there was a thought of maybe we could put in what's called a window wall system instead of a curtain wall system. So let's stop and talk about what's the difference between a window wall system and a curtain wall system. A curtain wall system hangs like a curtain on the outside of the building. So it doesn't hang at the top of the 5 stories and just swing in a breeze down 5 stories. It does have attachment points along, but the concept is the load is distributed in these points all the way down. Wherever those verticals are, it's getting transferred back into the structure. What's a window wall do then? If that's a curtain wall, well, a window wall, you've got a floor here and a floor here. It just sits between the 2 floors. It is between the 2, and it goes along between that. So as we contemplated using a window wall, because we thought that might be less expensive, we were kind of wringing our hands because we realized if you go from slab to slab, you're going to lose real estate, and that won't be very popular. We don't want to have the window system coming into the unit when we have shutters and other things and finishes already there. So our solution, as we worked on both the curtain wall and the window wall system, moved, just like the curtain wall was outside of the building, we moved the window wall to the outside. So our support system is outside of the building so that there isn't an impact to the interior. Please don't interpret me to say that if we do a window replacement project, there will be nothing happening in your unit. Yes, there are impacts by nature of replacing something. There's going to be finishes and things that have to be dealt with, but it's a much less intrusive thing to do it that way. Another criteria that was given to us right up front is please, 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 let's maintain the views. That's why we're all here. We want to see the views as much as possible. We really don't want to have big, heavy, thick frames, and we want to maintain that. So we've worked hard to try to keep the design concepts as close as possible to what's there. The reality though is that as you have thicker glass and it's a heavier system, there is some beefiness that happens in certain areas. And we'll talk to you about that, Jeff, when he gets up, we'll show you where that is. But all in all, you know, some of the systems, the verticals are actually going to give you a little bit more sight line, where if you were standing up, you would see it there. And the thickness tends to happen at the floor line where you're not looking anyway. So we're trying to make up for that and be careful in what we do. Then we were also, what we've offered is we won't just look at one system, we'll look at others. We want to see what's commercially available. Are there other options to this tested, tried and true? But we also started with the tested, tried and true, and you're going to hear the manufacturer's name of Conair. That's a very standard, commercially accepted window system that's out there all over the place. It's used. And so we usually start there because it's a very good sort of straight line. They have lots of answers and they're very helpful. So we start there and then we go from there usually. So we did that here as well. And then lastly, we were asked to deal with a couple of concerns. One had to do with one of the contractors previously had said, we don't think you can do a window wall. We think it's infeasible. And so as we've worked through it with our structural engineer, our conclusion is, no, we think a window wall is feasible here as an option. So we've considered curtain wall, we've considered window wall, and we've considered a custom system. And then lastly, there was some concern about implementing a vinyl window system that it wouldn't meet fire resistive requirements. We really haven't gone down that road very far because we knew in advance that the window system, if it's vinyl, is going to be much heavier and it's going to be much wider. So we haven't spent the time on that. I think that the one area of concern in the hallway is probably an area of concern, but we haven't spent time because that would be sort of like the tail wagging the dog. We'll get there in the process as we go forward. But we just don't think vinyl is appropriate for here, mainly because we wanted to try to maintain the views. So we haven't done that, gone down that road yet. So with that, I'm going to let you see some pictures. I asked Kirsten to come up and talk about our investigation to date, and he'll show you kind of some of our findings.
Thank you, Doug. Good morning, everyone. Again, as Doug mentioned, my name is Kirsten, and I was tasked to investigate the window conditions that we have around the property, and also to understand how they were attached to the building. And our focus for the windows is basically these windows that the tall 5-story aluminum frame window assemblies that are attached to a all concrete building. Both the floor and the walls are all concrete. So if we show floor plan or site plan. Okay, our investigation looked at all elevations of the building as to where the windows are, and we got to know what kind of conditions we found. And like Doug mentioned earlier, at the grade, why don't we go ahead and show them what the next slide is. At the grade level here, we have planters, and like I said, the aluminum assembly is built within a concrete building, both on the walls, on the ceiling, and on the floor. And as you can imagine, it's in a marine environment. We saw the aluminum showing its age of a 50-year-old system. So why don't we go into start to show the next slide. And what I mean by the system is we have the vertical mullion tubes that are hollow, and then the window assembly is attached at the floor line at every floor. That's how this assembly, this curtain wall system, is attached to the building. So next slide. As Doug mentioned earlier, the planter grade in a lot of areas slopes towards the building. And you can already begin to see that it's corroded pretty heavily where the soil is in contact with the aluminum window frame. Now these tubes are 4-sided aluminum tubes. And when they get up to the building, next slide, please. When they get up to the building, you can see that the stucco here is in direct contact with the aluminum frame, but it has started to dissolve or corrode the aluminum frame. So this was a 4-sided aluminum frame, but now it's in reality, it's really a 3-sided aluminum frame. So that allows air, moisture to pass in through this assembly as it is connected to the wall. And when we get up to the other side, here's another close-up of how the grade is corroding this aluminum frame system, both on against the building wall and at the floor level. And at some of the other areas at the top of the building, at the very roof area, the 5th floor, you can see a lot of water pitting up here, and the aluminum finish. And so this is quite common no matter where we went. Zoom back out, and we can see it in another area where we also have pitting on the aluminum frame. So it's showing its 50-year wear. If we zoom out a little bit, the other thing is, like Doug mentioned, is we have different colors. Over a period of time, the marine environment has changed the color of this anodized aluminum finish. That's really what this product is. It's an aluminum finish that's been anodized, and you can see this one's light brown, this one's dark brown, and they vary depending on its proximity or the exposure to the sun. Next slide, please. Some of the other failures that we saw was attempted repairs from perhaps previous leaks. We have sealant applied here around the bottom of the window. There may have been a leak here at this location, but we found similar type of sealant repairs along the verticals all throughout the property. So there have been, attempts made to fix this system, but as you can see, it's unsightly. It probably doesn't. It's always a maintenance joint especially when it's sealant. It's always going to be a maintenance joint. Zoom back out. And then we also have, as Doug mentioned, we have where the awning windows are, the operable windows. They're supposed to be sealed to this aluminum frame. But as you can see here, we have the sealant pulling away. So the weather stripping isn't really working anymore. It's either deteriorated or it's fallen off. Next slide. And with the testing part of it, we had a Degenkolb, Jeremy Callister from Degenkolb, the structural engineer, and a window installer help us with understanding how this system was attached to the floor. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a concrete floor and a concrete ceiling. And every one of these locations, that window system is anchored to the edge of the concrete slab. And so we had an opportunity to start taking these things apart to see how it was actually installed or attached to the floor system. Next slide. And again, another concern we found when we were ready to take this apart was look at the size of this awning, how open it is, and that's a concern, safety concern. But that can even swing out, I think, a little bit more, but nevertheless, that is too large of an area to not be protected. So we'll talk about how we're going to remedy that later, but let's go to the next slide. So what we did is, and what we learned is, here is your floor slab edge when it butts up right against the window assembly. How this window assembly is attached is by a metal bar that is embedded in the concrete slab. And at that metal bar, there are clips every so many feet that attach to the mullions, the big vertical tubes that we were talking about. That's how this system is attached to the floor. And we're talking about odors, smells, and sounds, and heat transmission. At the very edge corners of the window, we have these gaps, these holes. Why don't you zoom out a little bit more, Jim? They're about 1 to 2 inches open, and that actually is a hole down into the unit down below or above. What they did is for thermal purposes probably, is put insulation in there just to stop any of that stuff migrating between units. But that's probably a source, or one of the sources of why odors, heat, and sound is coming through those corners. Okay, next slide. The way it is attached, we worked with the structural engineer, and he was focusing on these clips that I talked about earlier. They are actually welded, one to the metal bar that's embedded in the concrete, and one welded to the backside of the window frame. And as you can see here is a weld joint. And in some locations, the structural engineer determined that some of those welds are just shoddy at best, let's say, in some cases, because it is a very confined space to weld. It's hard to get into. So he is concerned about the actual attachment in some locations of these window systems. So that is a concern that we're going to remedy as part of our repair. So I think with that, we're going to get into that and talk about what the repair system is like. And I'd like to introduce Jeff Mason.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Lots of challenges. Here, fix this. So we jumped in and said, well, where do we start? And so it was great to have the board and the members give us such a good program of things that they wanted to evaluate. And with Kirsten's team, and Jeff was a part of that, field evaluation came out here and documented and looked at all of the different conditions. And we sat down as a team and we said, well, we're going to scratch our head and figure out where we're going to go. And so we started to develop sketches conceptually of what a repair might look like, a repair or a replacement might look like. And we did it in building section and plan section, and did it in elevation, the number of things we were trying to study. It was important that we go out and look at industry leading manufacturers of aluminum window walls and curtain walls. And we did. We looked at a number of different manufacturers and evaluated the shapes, the sizes, the depths, the type of glass that they have. And we had 2 or 3 that we were looking at, and we said, we're going to start this process by looking at a 2 pair of systems from a company called Conair. And Conair gave us the ability to look at different shaped horizontals and verticals, look at different placement of the glass in the plane. Jeff, can you bring up our building section and zoom in a little bit? How about giving me what you'll see here when you want to come up and look at these later. This is a detail of the existing system. And so that was our go by. And you can compare it to what we're proposing. And over here, this is a view, an elevation view of the existing window, the existing profiles, true to dimensions. This is a proposal of what it would look like when it was replaced. And you'll start to see some differences in there. Oh, sure. Happy to. I'll remember to slow down and speak clearly too. Right. The existing window is very thin in profile, and the dominant aesthetic of the window system is this vertical. So the vertical projects out, the glazing line sits back. That was very important. That's an architectural aesthetic that we wanted to maintain. So we were able to do that with 2 different products and are developing them using a manufactured out of the box, we call it out of the box system. And we're also looking at it from a manufacturer that can do some custom work. If in fact we want to get it to look and replicate more closely to the exact profiles of the existing system. What you'll note over to the next one, Jeff. Some important things to note here is, zoom out a little bit for me, please. There we go. Is that no longer will the lower portion of the window be the operable awning, but in fact, we'll make the operable portion the casement window that's above. So that gives us here, that's perfect. Okay. That works. So whereas this lower panel was operable before, in order to create safety, we're creating a rail of glass and making the operable portion be bent on the side. And we worked with the manufacturers to make sure that they fit, they looked right, planes of glass did the appropriate thing that we wanted them to. We understood from them what the weight requirements were. We've had our structural engineers look at those weights and tell us that yes, with the existing concrete slabs, we can support this system, either in curtain wall or window wall. So either of them will work. wanted to get Jeff to show you this. And if you're ready, let me know when you're ready, Jeff. In the 3D format, because we have some interesting 3D views to share with you. Yeah. Let them tour this one. So it's important from the concerns of water and air leakage that we have a reputable manufacturer that builds windows and curtain walls in residential and commercial installations, so that we have a quality system. As noted, we're going to go from a single pane glass to a double pane glass. Increases the weight, but it also increases the performance of the window. As I mentioned, we're looking at developing these conceptual drawings. Our next iteration will be to refine them further, make sure that we know what all the structural components will be, where it's supported at each floor. There we go. So now you begin to see on the screen. Go ahead, Jeff, just continue to tour through. So this is a view of the existing system with the lower awnings and the upper fixed windows. And now we'll take a tour through a curtain wall that has operable casement windows. And what's nice about these casement windows and the placement of this horizontal member here is that there'll be no limitation to the amount of opening you can have. You can open these windows 90 degrees if you want. You get that much ventilation. So much more increased ventilation with respect to a system that's configured this way. That's safe, that's all new, weather tight, pretty, and last another 50 years. That's where we've gone with this. We had a couple of 3 different scenarios that we developed. Currently, we're showing you one. We think we're going to take 2 of them and carry them forward. You begin to see that's an inside view. Oh, I was going to say, go back and see the inside view from existing, just to do a quick comparison. Not substantially different. And that's what we'll want to show. I think the thing that stands out most when you look at the proposed, is you'll say the verticals look the same, window size look the same. You squint. This piece here is what begins to really stand out to you. And this is what happens at the floor. This is the ability to provide structure, to provide closure, insulation, sound insulation, weather insulation. But it also helps us provide these larger windows. These casement windows do have a maximum height. So by bringing it down a little, up a little, we're able to get right where we need to be to get to within the prescription, what the manufacturers are telling us are the maximum operable sizes. So that's where we are at the present time. We'll let Doug finish off. You bet.
Thank you.
So probably as we went through that, maybe we didn't say it quite like this, but in our investigation and looking at the options for repair, we basically felt like there isn't a repair option. The existing conditions would pretty much have to be torn out in total and come back. So the best we could do in that situation is to try to replicate what is there in a custom format. Whenever you use a pre-manufactured system, you're kind of stuck with their pieces, if you will. So what we're proposing to you is what's the closest we can get to what's there using pre-manufactured pieces. We have a custom scheme as well. Custom usually translates to more expensive. And we haven't finalized our pricing yet, so I'm not really ready to talk about that. But in terms of using something that is warrantable and is tested, tried and true in our profession, we feel like what we're presenting is really that. It's a really high grade good custom system that will work and serve the community well. So how much does all of this stuff cost? That's always a difficult thing to answer at an early phase, but our cost estimates that we've gotten from the contractor Nautilus and also looking at some of the other overall project costs from start to finish, we're looking in the range of around $6 to $6.2 million right now for these locations. So it's a pretty hefty price tag. But I think it's something that is just necessary. And I think the unfortunate thing and what we've seen even in our industry is just since pre-COVID versus post-COVID, or we're not even at post-COVID yet, obviously, but just prices have gone up significantly just since we, since before COVID. It was, it's probably, we're looking at 20% more since when we started this. So not when we started it, but when COVID started, if we had gone back, if we could put those prices there then. Where would we go from here? Assuming the association approved this, how would we move forward? What would that mean? There's a few steps that have to be done. We have to go from having 3 options to 1 option. So there's still some refinement on the design that needs to happen. We need to pick whether we're going with a window wall or a curtain wall or a custom system. And then once that's determined and we have a more finite cost at that point, then we'll do working drawings for construction that we can use for getting a building permit, that we can use for bidding the project. Then there is just submitting for a plan check, going through the process, getting your permits. That takes a few, usually a couple of months on a project like this. And then you put the project out to bid, you get the bids in, you negotiate the contracts. There's a phase that we call bidding and negotiation for that reason. And that's usually 2 to 3 months long. And then there's the construction process itself. And that, I'm not sure we have an estimate yet on timing, but ballpark-ish around 9 to 12 months of construction along the way. So we think that likely when this project happens, if you can imagine, we'll just call this a stack. So we'll probably do the construction in stacks and probably geographically in stacks. So let's just say we're in Tower 1, we'll do, however many the contractor, maybe he'll do all of the west elevation, all the stacks on the west elevation, something like that. That's still to be determined with the contractor when we actually get there, what's the most efficient way, what the manpower works in and out and that sort of thing. There's also, of course, concerns about you as owners. There's going to need to be some protection set up inside your unit when all those windows are taken off. There's a protection in terms of environmental protection, just dust and debris and things like that. But there's also just a hazard of not having windows there that you used to have. So you need to have that barricaded off. And then, of course, you've got people working, taking these things off. So there'll be protections on the site too, to kind of keep things safe. And that's all in the purview of the general contractor that will be retained by the association. So with that, I think that kind of concludes our presentation. We'll be taking questions and answers, but I wanted to give the board the opportunity to follow up. I think, Bob, you had mentioned that there might be some comments that you want to make around now.
Okay, so yes. So you heard a big number. What does that mean for you guys? Where's Bob Cavan? Went to the bathroom?
Go to the powder room.
Okay. Good timing, Bob. That's all right. So basically, I just did a quick calculation. What'd you say? 6.2 is about $70,000 to $75,000 a unit. Okay. So that's not, obviously, that's not something we have in the reserve. We have basically about $1.3 million in our reserves. So that's going to, in order to go forward with this project, it's going to require a special assessment. So I don't have $75,000 sitting around. I can tell you that, and I think most of us don't have that kind of cash sitting around. So Bob is going to explain some options for homeowners. You know, we support this assessment, we go forward. How are we going to come with $75,000 a unit, a person? So Bob's going to talk about some financing things real quick to make it sound so maybe it isn't quite as difficult as you think.
Good morning. What we're generally doing, and we're recommending to our clients that are trying to build a fund that they can attach as they get older, and if they have to draw it down, the cheapest way that we found is a home equity loan. And certainly you have to check with different lenders, because as I check with different ones, the pricing is unbelievably different. Right now, with interest rates where they're at, with respect to a home equity loan, the rates go from about 2.25% to 4.5%. You probably have to deal with a out-of-town bank to get the 2.25%. It's a variable rate loan, but basically, you only have to pay interest only with respect to that for the first 10 years. And at that point in time, you can either roll it another 10, or you can elect to amortize the loan over a period of time. I don't know how you can get money any cheaper than that. Basically, you would be looking at a payment of about somewhere between $150 and $200 a month if you pay the interest only for the first 10 years. So I don't know how to get the money any cheaper. We are setting up our older clients that need to have a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 line of credit. You only pay interest as you draw it down. So you get a checkbook from your lender, you write a check that month, you pay interest on the amount of money that you have outstanding.
Hi, good morning. I have a question. We need to pay them. How is the influx of the payment? I mean, all together, or will be like 50%? Are you going to split this?
Are you talking about how would we want $75,000?
Exactly. All together.
What we did previously when we had the last assessment here, which is about 15 years ago, it was a $20,000 assessment. We spread it out over 5 quarters. And so consequently in that one, it was $4,000 every quarter for 5 quarters. I think we could do that because obviously it's going to take close to a year to get this done. Once we get it bid out and by the time we get started, but we are going to need all the money by the point in time we get to the end.
So we're thinking about 1 year just to finish everything.
Correct. But I'll say you can go out and try a lot of different ways. You can talk to your banks and so on and so forth. A lot of the local banks are way, in my opinion, overpriced. Okay, so I mean, yeah, you can get starter rate. Union Bank right now is offering 1.99%, but their variable rate is at 4.49. And whereas if you go to First Third Bank on Cleveland, you can get 2.25 today. You're probably going to see 3 bumps in the interest rates next year. So consequently, you're looking at 325 basis points or 1/4%. 3 times. So that rate's probably going to go to about 3% at the end of next year. They're projecting that by the end of the following year, it might go as high as 4%. But who knows? They've been saying that forever. Nobody knows what the rates are. But the rates are, there's limits on them also.
If this is thank you.
If this is an urgent measure we need to take, or we can wait 1 more year or more time?
Well, I certainly hope by the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to have a pretty good idea of where this is going to be. And we're going to have bids from, I mean, obviously, we're not just accepting bids or what we're talking. You got to have an estimate, you got to have a number to shoot at. Certainly, we will negotiate as hard as we can with respect to it. But we'll know what it is probably in the next 4 months or so. And everyone will know. But I would anticipate that if I was anybody that needed to get a loan, that I'd start looking at it right now. The different options and the different lenders.
And the final decision.
Yeah, that's my point.
Be a homeowner vote.
It'll be a homeowner's vote.
Yeah.
And when is that anticipated?
I would imagine it'll be in the next 4 to 6 months, at the latest.
You need hard numbers.
So if you have any questions, we're at the meetings every month, but basically this was just, I've been doing this for about 55 years. I'm in the accounting business, CPA. And I don't know how you can get money any cheaper.
Basically, we want to move forward as quickly as we can because we've seen how the prices have gone up. So we delay this a year, it could be another 10% more, so I mean, we need to keep moving forward. We've been following this project for a long time. We need to get it going. We hope we get your support for the assessment. And one last question, I'm gonna turn over to the architects for any tech questions on the actual presentation. You have one question on the financing?
No, I have a question.
For the architects, they're gonna do a quick Q&A. Do we get anything from the chat, from the Zoom? Anybody in the Zoom? So we do, okay, so here we got a list of some.
Yeah. What if all owners cannot pay? How would that be addressed? They want to know if, one person wants to know if there can be a matching sliding glass door option.
Okay, well, we'll take a combination of questions from the room and some from the thing. So let's start with the first chat question. Jim, what was the first chat question?
Will there be an option to add on a matching sliding glass door?
Not part of this assessment. That would be the individual homeowner's responsibility. As a matter of fact, many homeowners, from the people who put the windows in the Tower 3 hallway, that company has been putting a lot of sliding glass doors in for different units here. I think the ones who got it are pretty happy with it. Who here got some new sliding glass doors from them? Were you guys happy with your? You love them. See, they love the sliding glass doors. So that was how they've been doing it so far. Imagine we get a contractor on board. If they have the wherewithal to do the sliding glass doors at the same time, or they would wait till the project's done, but they would maybe give you also some options for that, the individual homeowner's responsibility. Okay, one more from the chat, and I'll take one more from
Several people have asked, well, what if I don't have any problems in my unit? Do I also have to pay?
This is an HOA, a common area of all the whole HOA. This is the whole project. We can't pick and choose. You're going to do an entire stack. We can't say you can't do it. It's all the windows have to be done. All the non-sliding glass door windows have to be done.
How much of the reserve will be used for this project?
What we're saying here, what we'd like to do here is, you're going to be hearing from us about a structural study we did. It's going to require some other repairs. So we want to minimize what we are taking from the reserves for this project and get it from the assessment. So what we'd like to do is take the full amount for the assessment for this project, saving money in the reserves for the structural issues we'll tell you about in the next month or so. And also, if there's any overruns, we have the money in the reserves to cover any overruns that happen during construction, which can happen, especially with the way prices are going. It's been crazy. Okay, anybody, let's take a picture. Anybody in the audience here want a question? All right, lady in the back. But take your mask off and just ask her. Can't hear you.
Is the coloring going to be the same? So it'll be the dark bronze?
Yes, so far that's the intent. Yeah, I mean, we have to go through the process, and we haven't gotten feedback from the association to date. And so so far, we've just said replace in kind with the same system. But as I walked in the door today, somebody asked me, can we make it white on the inside? Well, you can do anything. So I wouldn't say there's still work to be done in the future. That could be dealt with as a potential, option or something like that. But I would just say from our work doing work for associations in the past, we typically try to come up with a uniform approach to make it much more efficient with time. Yes, ma'am.
Why are they bowing out? Why are they warping?
I can't answer that. I haven't looked at that.
I didn't realize they were. Did you?
Yeah, they're totally pulled out against out from the. Anybody else in the third tower on the third floor here? Have you noticed what's happening to those windows?
We'll take a look at it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And they remember they are vinyl windows.
Right.
We're not proposing vinyl windows here.
So when they be replaced, the work well.
I think that's, again, the intent. I'm using that word because we haven't finalized the design drawings yet. But yes, from our discussion so far, we would replace those. Yes.
just do one bedroom at a time, I presume, right?
Yeah, there are some, I don't know if you've noticed, but some of the stacks are, they're kind of a 135-degree angle of there's a little pivot point. So in that instance, probably you need to do both at the same time because they all come together. But for by and large, yes, you're right.
And would there be a requirement to move out of your unit while the work is being done?
Our hope, and again, we need to work through that with the contractor, would be no, that there would be protections put in place so that you could still reside there. I mean, it's never fun to live through a remodel project. I've been through it myself a couple of times. So it's painful, but I think again, the intention is to try to put in protections, both from a safety standpoint and also so that the stuff on the outside doesn't blow into your house and make everything dirty and things. Yes, ma'am.
But one thing to add to that, I believe the windows will be going on from the outside, not from the inside of the condo. Is that correct?
That's correct. They're coming in from the outside, but even so, there'll probably be somebody inside when they're getting mounted.
And about a week for staff.
I don't know. Yeah,
Nice one, staff.
good try.
Question back.
You know, this lady though, I started answering.
I was wondering, if you could tell me, from like 0 to 10, this project, do you consider it 0 routine, very simple project, or do you consider this 10 kind of experiential, we're out on a cutting edge of construction and architecture?
We're more on the 0 to 1 to 2 side. It's a very traditional standard project. I would also tell you though, in that sense that, you know, most people, when they think about replacing windows, they're talking about, I have one window over here, another window over there. And it's this is much more systematic in an approach and how, and that's, I think that's good for the association to do that, but there isn't anything cutting edge about the technology other than the fact that our whole culture has embraced being environmentally sensitive and has embraced being energy conscious. So many of the things that are getting employed are by nature. They're now code. I can't put a single ply or a single pane of glass up anymore because the code says you can't do it. So it implies that we have to increase the weight and stuff. So we don't see it as rocket science in the sense of we're doing something really unique and different, but there are technical aspects that are challenging that you do have to figure out.
So in answer to her question, which one do you think it was?
I said the 0
Easy
to,
or
I said
0 to
on the
okay.
easier in terms of what people have to know,
Yeah.
it's all common knowledge kind of stuff that we're dealing with here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so I live in the 5 stack of Tower 3, which has I think it's 7 windows across. So what's the design for that one? Is it similar to the 4 window design that you showed?
Yeah, you know, I probably should know the answer to this. There's only one or two areas here where the mullions seem a little extra closer together. And I do want to go back to that one particular elevation and see if we could have one less vertical mullion and have a little wider. But
Yeah, that was gonna be my question.
But for the most part, the design that you see in, I would say 95% of the time is going to be similar, very similar to what's there now.
Yeah, and it's gonna be always the 2 edge windows that open and then the rest won't open.
That would be correct.
Yeah, that's the way we're designing it because the original design with the awnings, they were on the side. So I think it's a cost thing too. You could probably have more of them open, but that costs more money. And so from trying to replace it in kind, even though we're going from low to high, we've used the same amount of openable windows that are there currently.
All right, let's take a couple of the chat questions. Give them an opportunity. Listen.
Okay, a few people have asked, are you proposing switching from 5 vertical to 4 as was shown in the?
I think you just answered that. The 95% of the cases, no. The only case we're looking at is the 1 5 stack we have, which has 7 windows, maybe going to 6.
Someone wondered if we could just make one huge window and make it more modern.
I think we're placing pretty much in kind keeping costs, or, you know, and the appearance the same. Okay, what else? What else you guys doing?
So several people.
Oh, somebody said they can't hear the question. Can you repeat the question when answering? Okay, well.
That's it. Thank you. It's okay.
By far, this project is not including the terrace fence by fire, right?
What?
The terrace fence. The terrace fence.
Oh,
No,
balcony
right?
railings? No,
Okay.
no.
I live in 211 and I have the same question. Is there any possibility we have only one window just to bring more surplus for the aesthetics, or it's
No.
impossible?
No,
No?
we're keeping it in kind.
Okay.
Give the mic to Jim. And what's another question? Jim?
Just to think about that for a second, though, if you were to have this one big piece of glass and it was up high, you'd lose the ability to have the openable windows at that level, because obviously you're not going to have one big giant piece of glass to open at that point. But honestly, ever since the beginning, and one of the benefits of the association is you really do have a well-recognized architect from Las Vegas who owns here, and he's participated in the process. So he's actually been dialoguing with me on the design. We even changed the location of the glass based on his input. So, and we really appreciated that. It's a good healthy dialogue, but we tried to maintain the original design aesthetic.
Okay, thank you.
A few people have asked, what if you can't pay? What happens? And other people are saying, why should units with more windows not pay more than the units with fewer windows?
I'm gonna let Frank answer that one.
Well, basically, as homeowners, I said this earlier, you don't own the windows in your condominium. Those are not your windows. Those are common area property. You actually own legally an undivided 1/85th interest in all the windows at Bay Scene. So unless we find, and I recognize there's some units with many less windows than others. And the CCNRs don't allow us to make an exception to that because the windows are common area property. It's like some people use the gym a lot, some people don't use the gym a lot. You all pay the same assessment every month.
Let me add to that. Plus, if you look at the CCNR is 4.8, division of assessments, payment of assessments, they shall be charged equally divided among all condominiums. The other thing is, number of windows is one thing, but the cost is many factors. It could be the height of where you're, the 5th floor is be more expensive than the 1st floor place. There's a lot of factors that come in play. We might have to do some grading and all that come in play. The number of windows is just one part of that, and also we're going with the CCNRs, I think, that have all the assessments going to be the same in its common area.
Someone asked, will they significantly improve the climate within the unit? Less cold, but
I think we said, I think the presentation said that. That's a major reason for doing this for doing the project.
Should improve.
Now, if you can't pay, Bob Kevin, do you want to address that one? What do you feel like you can't pay? Bob just gave, now, people are living in a place that went just for $2 million. You have a lot of equity in this place. Now, what Bob's suggestion was a home equity loan with using the equity you have in here and $150 to $200 a month. Now, I can't believe that there's somebody living here that can't afford an extra $200 a month. Now, what that would mean is if you sell, you're going to have that lien against the property. But if you let you stay in your unit and you can continue to, for extra $200 a month, you could pay and stay here. Bob, you want to add to that or anything?
Bob, I think that's just what it is. I mean, we can attempt to work with somebody if it was real serious problem. Well, obviously we can't do it with 25 people, but it's not that complicated to get a home equity loan. I can tell you that. I mean, they're not going to go over 60% loan to value with the first and whatever you have underlying. But it's pretty easy to get those loans. And if you start talking to your bank or the people at your bank, you can talk to them. If it's rate, most of them will compete. But I know trying to deal with Union Bank over the years, they don't compete. So sometimes you have to go to out of town banks and stuff to get the lowest rate if you're looking shopping for rate. But if you have the capacity, that makes sense because you're going to get the loan no matter what. If you don't have the capacity, you're going to pay a higher rate. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Here's a question. Let's read Pete Hall's question. He's talking about the structural study that we have going right now. There's issues with that basically are in the catacombs where we have some spalling on the floor of the catacombs. But he also mentioned the sagging of our floors. All our units, 50 years, the concrete slabs have started to sag in the middle and all. And this is something that the architects have just, we're not going to fix the sagging. Concrete sags over time. However, let's you address how you guys are going to handle the sagging of the concrete slabs.
I liked it that he said we weren't going to fix the sagging. Thank you. That was good. I think ultimately, if you look at the design, we're somewhat independent. We are definitely transferring loads into that, but they're loads that are already being imposed. And we have the option if we need to, because we haven't engineered this yet. So I'm kind of speaking like I got this down totally, but we've talked enough with our structural, feel confident that if the loads can't be imposed on the floor slabs that are there, we can span from wall to wall with some sort of a steel member there to hold the loads that we're going to do. So that's an option that we have if we need to. So one of those two, still to be worked out, but we don't foresee changing the slabs.
And the structural engineer, I talked to him about the sagging. We went into a couple of units and actually measured the sagging. He said this is, and I haven't gotten a report, but I'm putting his words as I present. He said this is the kind of sagging you would expect in a concrete slab, this construction over a period of 45 to 50 years. He says, I'm not alarmed by it. We're not looking at an imminent failure. But I do think he wants to take a look at that, a little bit more before he writes his report on that.
Well, it'll be part of the design that needs to be completed. We do have to finish that.
When asked about, is the homeowner responsible for taking off and redoing the interior, any curtains, blinds, all that?
Yes, that's a good question. So everybody's done different things to their interior finishes of their windows. In order to replace the windows, if you have things attached to that, they're going to have to come down. For example, if you have shutters up, you would remove them. Hopefully, the homeowner would be responsible for that, removing the shutters or removing whatever window treatment they have. But we're not going to encroach into the unit, so that's going to save a major expense. Like some units have ceilings dropped right up to the window glass I've seen. So if we were to bring the windows into that unit, that would mean having to redo that ceiling. We're not going to go there. We're staying within the same plane that the windows are now. So that expense is not going to be there. However, if your window treatment is bolted in there, you're going to have to unbolt it and remove it to get them out. Then that would be your expense, yes.
We may have a contractor or two lined up to help.
Yeah, we can suggest contractors to help with that, but the homeowner would negotiate with that contractor and work with them to do that. But yes, we can find some contractors to do that.
On the current windows, the horizontal measurement actually extends beyond each floor, so I guess they're gonna change that, so it kind of, it matches up with the floor.
Right, that has to do with okay, yeah, so currently,
The horizontal.
currently, the floor line is behind the glass, and so it's a very thin aesthetic here, and now it's going to be wider in that area. And that does a couple of things. One is if you do the window wall system that we talked about, it allows you to not have to go into the unit. You can come out because the structure is going to be outside. So if I'm over here where Bob's standing, currently a very thin profile in that area. That's where all the sound and the smell and the smoke and stuff transfers now. In the future, it's going to be a heavier structural element that's there that supports the loads. That's why they're doing. And then the other thing that Jeff talked about is today, the awning windows are low at the floor line, and in the future, they're going to be high. And one of the you start balancing what the code requires. Well, the code requires that this horizontal can't be any less than 36 inches above the floor. It's sort of like a guardrail, if you will. And so that effectively sets that elevation. And then there are just physical limitations as to how large this upper panel can be. And it's like 60 inches. So that meant we had to come down just a couple of inches to get that. So there's a few things at play. It's not a simple one item question to answer, but yes, you're astute in noticing. Yes, sir.
Hi. My question is this, you made a pretty compelling case that something ultimately is going to need to be done. If nothing is done at this juncture, do you foresee our hand being forced at some point in the future, and what would be a reasonable expectation of that?
Well, I think it comes back to, could we repair in kind versus replacing? I think eventually the more people start retrofitting windows, the more problems that we're going to start having. So as people keep saying, no, I'm gonna put the new awnings in, we're gonna put fixed, or I'm gonna put new casements in, we're gonna have fixed at the bottom. You get enough of that happening, I think you're gonna start seeing things come apart. I'm not saying what the other lady said earlier about the vinyl windows, that I'm not proposing that, but things could start to dislodge. More leaks could begin to happen than you currently have. More air infiltration. It's sort of a collective will thing. It's like, at what point do we say enough's enough? So we're trying to tell you, we think you're there. We think you're at the end of a 50-year-old window system and it's time to do it. Could you go another 5 years? Yeah, you probably could get there from here. But if you do that, as Bob said so aptly, prices keep going up. So as much as we, and I've seen it happen before, you know, everybody embraces that it's an issue that needs to be done, but let's just kick that can down the road. And then when they come back, it's like, oh my goodness, it's 50% more than it was. And I'm not saying that's going to happen here exactly, but I think that's what Bob's cautioning is like.
Well, that and one more thing, we've already started with design costs. We've hired a consultant, we paid design costs, there's design cost part of the project. 5 years from now, this is not going to be well, the design cost, but that's going to increase again too. We'll be paying design costs twice to hold off. So we've gone down this road for 8 years. We've done all these studies and all this. It's time to move forward now. I mean, this is it. It doesn't get any easier. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
How long do you think each condominium will be put out during this process once you're doing each stack? And will it be both stacks in each condo done simultaneously, or will it be one stack in your condo and then down the road another stack?
You must have been talking to Stan. That's the same question he asked me before. No, I don't know the answer to that question, honestly. I would think logistically, it makes more sense for a contractor to work and do everything within a unit rather than we're only going to do this one, then we're going to come back and do that one, because it's less disruptive that way. But I don't want to speak for the contractor. There may be some efficiency that I don't know about right now. And then how long that actually will take. Okay, well, I'll let him talk in a minute, but one of the things that I'll say is that some contractors can find themselves with a glut of qualified manpower and say, we can bang this out in 6 months, but it's going to be like a beehive around here. Are you guys willing to handle that? Or you might find yourself where many people find themselves today, like, we can't get qualified workers. So therefore, we're going to have to take this, one whole stack at a time, and that's going to take longer, kind of thing. So we're not there yet. I can't answer, but I'll let you.
No,
You have talked to the contractor.
We talked a little bit about this with the contractor while they were putting their price estimate together. and talking about logistics, and their feeling was that they, at a minimum, would work at 1 unit stack at a time, but that doesn't mean that they don't have demolition started on one, and then they come in with the team that's doing the install, and then the demolition team moves on to the next unit, so that there's this rotation. But it would be, I think your question is perfect, because we will want to consider how much disruption there is within an individual dwelling unit. So if there are 2 stacks of windows, they should go at the same time. I think that's a smart move, so that there isn't the move in of the contractor, the move out, the move back in, and then the move out. He comes in one time. It disrupts whatever there is at the time. And we also did have a conversation about, or is the contractor going to help those that want to move out, move out? And I said, well, that's a great question. That's another question we want to table for discussion with the board as we move this thing forward, which is, okay, some people may feel comfortable. Said, no, I don't want to move out, but you can barricade the work area and we'll be satisfied. Others say, heck no, relocate me for a week, whatever it takes. Those are things to be, those are things to be determined. So if you're thinking about those things, know that we're thinking about those things too. But your comment and your question is perfect. I'm glad you asked it.
Okay, I got a couple of things in the chat. I see somebody saying Tower 3 has more windows. Well, Tower 3 also has more units. So the price per unit is still the same. Another question, can we keep the awning windows? I don't know if that question was answered, but I think the code, we don't no longer allow the awning windows. They're not part of code. They're a safety issue. Okay, then one more. When will we know the official assessment amount? I think we said that we're going to move forward with design, hopefully, and then we will get in the next couple of months. We probably will have some better numbers for that, and we'll start to put together the assessment for a vote. So I would say what, 2 to 3 months, maybe 4 to 6. 4 to 6, but yeah, I'm always optimistic, I guess. Yeah. Your alignment is almost up. A number of questions.
No, as far as the vote, is it a simple majority?
Oh, good, very good question. Where we understand it, talking to Venus and all, it is a majority of the homeowners who vote. So if you don't vote, say we have 85 units, 80 vote, then we need 41 units to approve it. Now, we will obviously be working with our attorneys to make sure that is correct, but that's my understanding right now. Majority of the units that vote. So, if you want to represent you, get the vote in. By the way, I'll get a little calculation. We have about 50 units represented today, at least. I'm maybe even more than that. I haven't quite counted again, but between Zoom and people here, I was just kind of documenting how many units we have. We have a pretty good number of units that are hearing the presentation, which is good. All right, we're in Zoom. Jim, anything else from Zoom? If a homeowner does not pay their fair share, Bob said they couldn't do it. No, basically, we have homeowners sometimes that don't pay their monthly HOA dues. It gets so big, we have to go to foreclosure. So that happens. It's happened, and that's what happens. So every homeowner will have to pay the assessment. That's how it is in the condominium.
You addressed the labor shortage. What about material? Is the material manufactured mostly here in the United States, or is it coming in from other parts of the world?
That was also a question I was asking of the contractor during our conversations with his workup. And he tells me that right now with window materials and such, that there is not an issue with having to wait on materials. He said if you started the job today, it would be the normal lead time, 6 to 8 weeks and to get rolling. Does that change next month? Good. Don't know. But right now, they're not seeing that. Don't know. Don't know. We can certainly look into that.
Bill,
I'm gonna ask the hardest question. What if the assessment doesn't pass?
I just saw another person ask that question. The assessment doesn't pass, we cannot move forward. We will have sunk, all the costs that we have done in design and studying all will be sunk costs. We will have further deterioration of the windows, further living with the issues we have. At some point, maybe it's 2 years, maybe 3, 4, 5, who knows? We're gonna have more failure. It's gonna become such a safety issue that it's almost automatic, but it's gonna be starting over from scratch, where we need them right away. Not a process like this never happened right away. So this is the time is right. We need to encourage your fellow homeowners. So we need this and be vocal, and let's get this thing passed and be positive. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
Well, if it does turn out to be a safety issue, the CCNRs allow us to proceed without a homeowner's vote.
Right. But so that would probably be, the show was a safety issue. It would probably show there's been some failure. We don't want to wait to the point where there's actual failure, where something safety, and then all of a sudden we're caught rock and hard place. We don't have a design that's adequate design, we're stuck.
But
So we need to be proactive here before there's a failure and move forward.
they're functionally failing now.
But I'm saying something falls off or something like that, you know.
We have no structural failure yet.
No, not yet, but you know, we don't want to wait to that point because then it's too late.
We don't want to be Miami.
Right, thank you.
Could you give us an idea of how much you've spent on the design package?
The study so far.
The study, thank you.
Yeah, you know, Frank?
I don't have the contract with me. I don't remember. Was it 40?
About 40,000, is that about right?
A little more.
A little more, about 40 to 50,000. So, yeah, it's not cheap. And then they're designed and put together, you know, it's going to be several $100,000, okay? That's going to be part of the cost and all. So it's not cheap. And so we don't want to lose momentum and have to go back and start over and all that.
We're going to be negotiating with the architects about their fee for the design phase too.
Okay, I think we've covered most questions. If we find some we did not cover, we will send them out in an email. We'll answer some questions. Keep in mind, if you didn't tell your neighbor, say, "Oh, I didn't see the presentation." It's going to be on the website in a couple of days, maybe, or whatever, when Jim puts it up. So the presentation will be on the website, and so let's get as many homeowners to see this as we can. I guess we are going to move forward with their contract and keep going to get a better cost so we can go for the assessment. Let's be positive and let's get this project moving. Want to say something, Bob?
I'll just say one thing that should be obvious to everybody in this room. If this doesn't happen, it's going to affect the value of units here. If anybody thinks it isn't, you're not paying any attention to the real world. It will affect the value. There is no meeting that goes on here that people that are buying don't get copies of the minutes. More and more people are looking at where reserves are and how underfunded they are. I can tell you, when I first started on this board about 21 years ago, we had about $150,000 in there for reserves for windows. Then we moved it up to about $3 million. If you think we're underfunded now we're up here looking at $7 million. The next reserve study is going to show this thing so far underfunded. I mean, you just have to pay. The reason we're at where we're at is the board for the first 30 years didn't get enough in the reserves. We've certainly built those reserves a lot over the last 20 years. I mean, we've gone from $500,000 to $1.5 million, thank God. But if you really, when you see these windows, if you really were going to fund the reserves, you're looking at that $12, $13, $14 million. I mean, it's the same as a house. It's the same as owning buildings. I mean, I'm doing remodels on some kitchens and bathrooms and apartments right now. We were doing them a few years ago at $15,000. Now we're at over $40,000 a unit. So get real with respect to the cost and what it's going to do with respect to values.
I've been on the welcome committee for the last several years, and Bob and I meet with new owners. And it's been raised many times that a new owner talks to us and has said, my agent told me that when I buy this, that new windows are going to be built here. Okay, that it's obvious the windows that we have aren't too cold, and I do worry about these lower windows. So people who are coming here have been hearing words that we're going to be replacing these. And I think too, I've been living in a condo a number of years. I used to own a home. I used to have a lot of monthly upkeep on my home. And if I owned a house that had 50-year-old windows, there's no question those windows would have been replaced by now. I mean, we have friends who have homes that are less than that who have had to replace their windows. So I think this is just something that is part of owning a structure that is a high level structure, and we want to maintain that high level and keep our values. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I think we're thanking everybody for attending. I would ask anybody that's physically good shape to help us clean up. We have no staff here. We got to put all the folding chairs back, put the chairs back in there. So we would appreciate some help if you want to stick around a little bit and help us put the room back together. Otherwise, I think we thank our consultants for all their work. I think it turned out pretty well, with Jim for getting this audio visual together. That really made things easy. Thank you all for attending.